So this week on my podcast episode, I'm going to talk about panic attacks and anxiety attacks. Why do I think that this is really important for us to talk about? Well, oftentimes I find myself getting phone calls or text messages from people kind of stating, Aaliyah, I think I've experienced like an anxiety attack or panic attack, but I'm not quite sure if that's exactly what it was. And so there's that confusion and that not understanding element when it comes to anxiety and panic attacks, right? I don't think it's often talked about in a space like this. And I don't think people are able to recognize when they're even experiencing one. So I wanted to really give that to my followers and those who are listening, because I want you to know that you're not alone if you do feel like you've had numerous of anxiety attacks, or maybe not numerous, maybe you had random anxiety or panic attacks. And if you have panic attacks as well, I also want to reassure you that you're not alone. And then I also want to give my followers the knowledge of what does it look like, how does it look different for other people and how it might look like for me. What are the warning and signs? What are the differences between the two? And how can I really help myself when I'm experiencing one? So that's why I thought it was a brilliant idea to talk about that this week, especially because it's something that I deal with myself. So let's kind of move into my personal experience with anxiety attacks, panic attacks, and how much I love them. Psych. I actually really can't stand them. They are honestly really frightening for me, and it's something that I really dread to have to go through. So I try to take the proper steps and precautions to really help myself not get into one, but I'm also learning proper coping skills if I am in one and I find myself in an anxiety or panic attack type of situation. So my personal story with anxiety attacks and panic attacks. Well, I honestly started experiencing them in high school. I didn't know what they were though, just like a lot of people, right? And so when I was having that throughout high school, and it is specifically, I remember it was 10th grade, I was having these, I remember being upstairs in the kitchen and just like all of a sudden just going straight into a panic attack. And it was due to the amount of high stress I was going through. I felt like I was just failing at everything and I had no control of anything. So at that age of maybe 15, 16, I was going through a lot and also no control of my own autonomy as a child, especially in the home that I grew up in. So it's been something that I've noticed I've experienced in the past. And then as of now, 2021, I've dealt with a lot of them, like a lot of panic attacks, a lot of anxiety attacks. It specifically kind of got brought on and was exacerbated due to the passing of my brother. And it was hard. It's difficult. And I didn't really understand what they were, but they started to take form and started to show up in the middle of my sleep. So when I would be sleeping, I would fall asleep a lot of times with like ruminating thoughts, but I would wake up in a panic, sort of say kind of thing. So I would wake up and I would be like, I would just immediately go into panic. And I remember there was one episode I had where I was just in bed and I woke up, and again, this might have been maybe 2 months after the passing. I woke up and I was like, and I was shaking. Like I was literally trembling to the bone. And I was just shaking in bed. And my first instant thought was, oh my goodness, I must have COVID. Like I must have a fever. And if you know my backstory, my brother passed away with COVID. And so that's a huge fear for me. That's a huge trigger. So anytime like I feel like weird, like I can go into an anxiety attack, or later on I can find myself in a panic attack. So when that happened that night, I woke up sheer panic. literally panic. And I remember I just burst out of bed, and I remember everything was going lightning speed. Like I couldn't grasp my thoughts. It felt like I was just moving, like boom, 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 boom. I need to go get help right now. The urgency was so insane. So I go in my parents' room, I wake up my dad, and I go, Dad, I need you to wake up. And he's just like, what? And I was like, that's when I couldn't even breathe. So now my heart is boom, 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 boom. And I can't even breathe now. So now I'm gasping for air. I'm like, Dad, I need you help. And I am like shaking. And I'm also having these huge heart palpitations. So my dad leads me to the bathroom. And I remember, again, another trigger of mine is my mom. So my mom is obviously trying to help the best way she knows how, but she doesn't understand that that is triggering me more. And I'm scared that she's gonna like react the same way that she did when my brother was in the hospital, and I get flashbacks now. So I kept telling her like, no, I need my space, like please, like I just need Dad. And so my dad's trying to help me, and he's kind of just like, Aaliyah, like you're gonna have to work through this. And I remember just I got on the ground of the bathroom, and I think this was the saddest moment for me. And I got on the ground, and I'm like, I'm gasping for air. I'm crying and I'm trembling, and I'm on the floor, and it's a cold floor, and it's like 3 a.m. in the morning. I don't think I said that, but it's 3 a.m. in the morning, and I'm just on the floor shaking back and forth. And my dad's kind of like, well, how can I help you? And I remember I got into fetal position. Like I literally collapsed into fetal position on the floor. And my dad I asked him, I said, can you just, I need that sensation. Like I need that sensory feeling. I need someone rubbing my back. Can you please rub my back? And he did. And I remember we were on the floor there for like 20, I don't even know, because there were parts of me that felt like I was like out of body experience, and then I'd be back in it, right? So that's one instant and one memory that I have of my panic attacks. Or there's sometimes if I'm at home, like at my apartment, I also, like if I'm alone, again, that intense fear of, COVID, being in college, like that's real for me. And so I would have an anxiety attack, and I would know when it's coming on. So what I described before was a panic attack because it came out the blue. But my anxiety attacks, when I find myself really in my head about like COVID, PTSD memories, audio PTSD, like remembering like certain sounds. One of the big triggers for me is COVID, and then there's school combined. So when I'm in that place, when I'm in that mindset, maybe I'm holding a lot of tension in my throat, and now it's kind of sore. So I think it's COVID, right? And I'm ruminating in that thought all day. And when that happens, I get these signs. Like I know that if I don't turn around how my mind is thinking, I'm going to fall into an anxiety attack. And I catch it almost every time because I know that this is what's going to happen. This is what the result is going to be. And an anxiety attack that I can think of was my boyfriend had slept over. And this was actually a month ago, I think. And he had slept over, and there was something that like health related. And I'm pretty sure it was COVID again, or it was just some random health scare that I had. Again, health anxiety that I have. So I just remember there was something that triggered the thoughts. And again, I was just in this very ruminating place. Like I was just thinking about it, and it just wouldn't stop. And so I went to bed, and I knew that it was coming on because I get like these cold shivers. Like I feel like pins and needles all over. So I started feeling them slightly before I went to bed, and I was like, okay, let me just go to bed. And I did. And I woke up again in absolute like fight or flight freeze mode. I woke up and I looked at my boyfriend. I was like, I can't. I'm in anxiety attack. Like I'm feeling it, right? Like I'm going through it. And he's just like, okay. So luckily he was there, but I didn't sleep at all that night. Like I would maybe sleep for like 20 minutes, wake up. And so he was in and out of sleep with me, but there was the heart palpitations again. My stomach was not feeling good. I remember that. I just remember those racing thoughts. I was up and I was moving all over the apartment. Like I was literally like, it's urgent. Like I'm going. And I was just like, this is insane. And I knew the thought was irrational. And I continued believing that it was fact. Therefore, the anxiety attack just kept going. And he was really good with it and he was really patient, and I really thank him for that. But those are some of the experiences that I've had with my anxiety and panic attacks, right? I notice and I know when they are coming on. I know the signs, I know some of the symptoms that I have with either or, but I'm really particularly knowledgeable in my panic attacks because those are the ones that I experience the most, right? And so that was kind of a little bit more information about how my panic attacks and anxiety attacks work for me. So then I kind of expanded that question to everyone else on Instagram. And so I asked the question of the week. I said, have you ever had an anxiety attack, to my followers? 86% of you said yes. And 11% of you said nah. I have never experienced an anxiety attack. And for those who have never experienced one, I'm honestly really jealous. I'm not gonna lie. And then the second question that I asked for the question of the week was, have you ever had a panic attack? 85% of you said yes, and 15% of you said nah. And for those 15% of you, I wish I was you. But no, seriously. So I thought that it was really interesting to get kind of the view of the public, because I think it's important for us to acknowledge and think about, have I actually ever had an anxiety attack, or have I had a panic attack? What did that look like for me? And then I also wanted to make sure that you know that you're not alone either. So now we're going to move into what are the differences between a panic attack and an anxiety attack. Now, oftentimes we might really get confused between the two, I'm going to lie, right? It's hard. I think there's so many different things that go on with mental health. It's kind of really hard to remember what's the difference between the two, right? So I kind of wrote down a few notes of what the difference is between a panic attack and an anxiety attack is. So here I have that panic attacks usually occur without a trigger. Anxiety is a response to a perceived stressor or a threat. So again, those panic attacks just kind of come on sporadically, and you don't really think of like, oh, I know why I got a panic attack, right? Sometimes they just come on. And then anxiety attacks are usually a result of a stressor or a threat. So like for me, like I said before, that was my fear of my health. Like health is a really big thing for me now. And so that's when I know. And those are my triggers. So what are your threats? What are your triggers? Or do you really ever get the two confused, right? So again, panic attacks usually come on with no perceived kind of threat or trigger, whereas an anxiety attack is that perceived threat or trigger, right? Then I have the symptoms of a panic attack are intense and disruptive. They often involve a sense of unreality and detachment. And anxiety symptoms vary in intensity from mild to severe, right? So again, what are we feeling when we're feeling that panic attack, right? It's intense, it's disruptive, it comes on out of nowhere. And then again, you have that feeling of unreality, that detachment. And then your anxiety symptoms could vary in like intensity. So oftentimes with a panic attack, it's super intense all the time. Where anxiety, it kind of just depends on the severity of that threat or trigger that you perceived. And then I have panic attacks appear suddenly, while anxiety symptoms become gradually more intense or over the minutes, hours, and days, right? So, like we said before, those panic attacks kind of come out of nowhere, where those anxiety attacks are more so, it can build up. It can really build up into how intense your anxiety attack is. And then panic attacks usually subside after a few minutes, while anxiety symptoms can prevail for long periods. So for me, my panic attacks can kind of wax and wane. I don't think it can. Sometimes it's a while. It takes a little bit, and then sometimes it is done in a couple minutes. Same with my anxiety attacks, right? So my anxiety attacks can last in minutes, it can last in hours. It just depends. I've definitely noticed that I've had anxiety attacks that can last like maybe like 5 hours. So it all just depends on you and what's going on for you internally, what's going on for you mentally, emotionally, and physically as well. And so, what are some of the symptoms that you might feel when it comes to your panic attacks or your anxiety symptoms, right? So, those anxiety attacks and panic attacks oftentimes come along with symptoms that are absolutely annoying. So, some of the panic attack symptoms that you might feel, and again, it looks so different for everyone, but it's good to know because you can always pick up one and drop one off too. Like, so you might have one symptom, one panic attack, but then another panic attack, you might have a completely different set of symptoms, right? So it's just important to kind of understand the broad spectrum of all the symptoms that you might experience. So some of the symptoms that you might have are a racing or pounding heartbeat, chest pain, dizziness or lightheadedness, hot flashes or chills, nausea, numbness or tingling in extremities. So you're feeling that numbness and tingling on throughout your bodies. I feel them in the legs. That's how I specifically know when I'm going to have a panic attack, is when I start feeling it in my legs. Shaking, shortness of breath, stomach pain, sweating, feeling like you just can't speak, or you're feeling like you're being choked, or you're kind of gasping for air, can also be signs too. And then oftentimes when you feel like you're having a panic attack, you feel like you're losing control, right? Or you feel like you're going crazy. You feel like oftentimes with a panic attack and anxiety attack too, you feel like you literally have to go to the hospital. I know, but you should see the amount of people who do go to the hospital for a panic attack or anxiety attack, especially if they don't know. So again, that's why I think it's so important for us to talk about this, because there have been a bunch of times, still to this day, where I might have a panic attack or anxiety attack and feel like I need to go to the hospital, and I'm this close to calling an ambulance. But I have to always remind myself that, hey, you know what this is, but it still tricks me every time. So it's intense. And I oftentimes compare an anxiety attack to a feeling of, or you might hear that some people might compare an anxiety attack to a heart attack. You get those increased heart palpitations, right? You're sweating, you can't breathe, or even with panic attacks, you're getting the tinglings, it's a trip. I'm sorry. It is absolutely insane, but I think it's very important to talk about nonetheless. So now that we kind of went into the panic attack symptoms, I kind of want to talk a little bit about the anxiety attack symptoms, right? So you can get symptoms like being easily startled, chest pain, dizziness, dry mouth, fatigue, fear, irritability, muscle pain, loss of concentration, numbness or tingling again in the extremities, a rapid heart rate, shortness of breath, sleep disturbances, the feeling of being choked or smothered, like again, and a worry and distress. So, like you kind of saw, a lot of them kind of cross over with panic attacks, which kind of makes it confusing, right? But I think, again, I just want to emphasize how it's important to realize and just be knowledgeable of all the things that you might experience. Not saying that we're all going to experience the whole list, but we might experience a few of those. And those things might kind of, when you heard them, you're probably like, oh, I experienced those symptoms. Absolutely. And I think it's always important too to talk to a doctor or to talk to a professional, a mental health professional as well, just to get that second opinion, right? Kind of get that resources that we need. Now we're going to talk a little bit about what to do when you're experiencing a panic attack or an anxiety attack. Well, I'm currently still going through it. I'm still feeling and getting panic attacks, anxiety attacks. So I'm only going to provide the knowledge that kind of has helped me and the things that I've done to kind of help and subside those symptoms, or even the things that I've done before the panic and anxiety attacks to really help sway how things kind of go and play out for me. So before I have an anxiety attack or panic attack, right? I try to do things to really help de-stress. So I try to do things like journaling. I try to journal before bed at least 15 minutes so that I'm able to get everything out on paper. Another thing that I try to do is get my exercise in, make sure that I'm meeting all of my resources. So making sure I'm eating good, healthy meals, taking my vitamins, getting enough sleep, taking care of myself, my self-care. I make sure that I meet those needs, because if I don't, that's just like a slippery slope. So if I don't meet those personal needs, I am just kind of setting myself up for high stress, for my anxiety to really go through the roof. And that's oftentimes when I find myself in a situation of having an anxiety attack or a panic attack. So what's important is to make sure that we're doing things before we've experienced those symptoms of panic or anxiety, right? We want to be, what is the word? We want to be proactive. We want to be able to do these things and just instill it in our daily routine, so we just help ourselves overall, mentally, emotionally, physically, and all those things. So making sure that you're taking care of yourself is key, right? Making sure that we're acknowledging the stress levels that we have is key. So then what do we do when we feel the symptoms coming on, right? So we're kind of feeling maybe a little increase of the heart rate, or we're feeling a tight chest, or we're feeling the tingling sensation, or we're feeling the irritability. We're feeling the, oh, I'm kind of that intense panic, or, you're kind of just feeling anxious, right? And that intense anxious, or you have that thought that keeps ruminating. And I guess a lot of those that I'm mentioning is more steered towards anxiety attack. With panic attacks, I think it's more important that we do the things before. So making sure that we're taking care of ourselves in order to help alleviate the amount of times that we're experiencing panic attacks, right? But because oftentimes, like I said before, panic attacks are so sudden. But with anxiety attacks, you might get a lot of warning signs before you actually go into an anxiety attack. So if you find yourself ruminating in thought, if you find yourself kind of like really tense, really stressed, if you're feeling those things, and oftentimes I get little tell signs again before I go into an anxiety attack, it's important to have a toolbox. So I've talked about this before on episodes prior, and it's important to know the things that help us, the things that help us during certain situations when we're in distress. So some of the things that I like to do when I start to feel those symptoms is I like to go for a walk if I can. So if I can go for a walk, and sometimes I'll put in music to really help. Um, so I'll go for a walk and kind of just take a 5-10 minute walk to kind of clear my mind and kind of zone into the music instead of my thoughts. I found that really helpful, especially during the spring and summertime, because everything just looked pretty and it was warm and it was just nice. So I liked it. Another thing that I've done is that I outreach to a friend or a family member. So I'll call a friend or a family member and I'll kind of maybe, we'll just kind of chat about anything. Or if I do feel up to talking about, like, I feel like I might fall into an anxiety attack, I like to kind of voice that to them if I feel comfortable. And it's nice. It's a nice way to really kind of get my mind off of it, or to express and acknowledge that I know what's going on, instead of, sometimes my brain is telling me, oh, you have this, that, and the third health wise. So it's nice for me to talk to a friend or family member and say out loud, my mind is tricking me. I might fall into an anxiety attack, and here is why. Because then I am realizing myself that I'm okay. I'm safe and I'm okay, right? Also, with the safe and okay, I like to remind myself. So if I'm not talking on the phone with anyone, I'll sit down and I'll literally I'll decompress and I'll tell myself, Aaliyah, you are safe. You are okay. You are loved. You are healthy. You're good. And I'll do that positive self-talk, right? Again, that can be a hit or miss some days, but some days it helps. Some days it might not help that much, but I try it anyway. Another thing that I try to do is I try to drink water or tea warm. I like my water warm. So I'll try to have something warm. I'll also try to use my anxiety blanket, which is really helpful because I'm a sensory person, so I love such an intense weight on me. I love I like touching things that are soft. Those things really help calm me. So I use tools like that. I'll use my anxiety blanket. I'll use this really soft pillow that I have, especially at night if I wake up in an anxiety attack or a panic attack. I self-soothe. So I use the technique of self-soothing, and I'll get my soft pillow and I'll literally rub it with my fingertips. Something about that is so calming for me, and it helps so much. And I'm often like, if that's at night, in the middle of the night, I'm right back to sleep after a couple minutes of doing that. So yeah, we want to make sure that we know what helps us, right? Is it self-soothing? Is it using your blanket? Is it calling a friend? Sometimes I like to invert my mind and play Animal Crossing. So I might play a game of Animal Crossing or Sims, or I might turn on one of my favorite shows that are calming. I try to pick a really calming show, because if it's too something about the energy of a show. So if it's too rambunctious, if there's a lot of loud noises, same with my music, I try to steer away from that, because I don't know what it is, but that makes me more anxious. So I try to pick things that are consciously calming, and gives a calming effect. So those are things that I do, especially with an anxiety attack. Now, if I'm feeling myself, if I felt like I'm going into a panic attack, or I've gone into a panic attack, that's different. Okay, there are some different techniques that I use for that. Oftentimes, I will literally sit there, and I've been practicing this more. But if I feel, I do this with an anxiety attack too, but I find myself doing this a lot more with a panic attack, because that panic attack is so intense. So I will sit there, and if I feel it coming on, I literally tell myself, bring it. I know, sounds weird, right? But I actually learned in my classes at clinical counseling in grad school, you want to challenge your panic attacks or your anxiety attacks. Why do you want to do that? you are basically realizing that you're going to be okay. You're going to be safe and you will be perfectly fine after this, right? So you want to sit there, and sometimes I pretend like I'm literally talking to my anxiety or panic attack, and I literally say, bring it. Like, bring it on. Let's go. And like, I get this intense, like, come on, let's go. Bring it on. I want to feel you. Let's do this. And a lot of times it actually has worked. It really has worked. So you really want to challenge your anxiety or panic attacks. You want it to come on. You want to take that power back over your anxiety and your panic. So challenge it. Tell yourself in your head, if you want to, let's go, bring it on. Let's start the panic attack. I know it sounds weird. Trust me, it has helped me. You can try it. It might not help you. It might sound weird, but it's helped me a lot. So that's one thing that I do for my panic attacks. Another thing that I do, and I wish I kind of brought it. Hold on. Okay, so there's another thing that we learn in grad school, right? You want to take like a yoga mat or a roller. And so I'm rolling this up, right? And you want to lay on the ground. You want to lay on the ground and you want to place something that's rolled up. Again, yoga mat, a pillow, blanket. This is what I have right now. And you want to place this behind you and you want to lay flat on the ground. Again, always ask a professional, medical professional as well, before you do any of this. But this is just a tip if you want to try it. Again, I have not graduated from grad school yet. I can't wait till I do, but I haven't. I'm just sharing the knowledge that I've learned through grad school. So again, you want to put this behind your back and you want to lay on it. You want to lay down on top of it. You want something that's pretty, that's going to have your back naturally arch. And the reason why you want to do this is oftentimes when we're going to fall into a panic attack, and I'll include anxiety attacks here as well, our chest, our breathing, airways, everything feels super tight, right? We feel like we're not getting in enough air. And one of the things that is really important is diaphragmatic breathing. Being able to take in breath, being able to breathe is super duper important for us to slow down our anxiety, our panic, to regulate, because our brain can't be anxious and calm at the same time. So you're going to want to use this, put it behind your back and make that natural arch laying on the floor. And what happens is that archway broadens up and opens up those airways. And you want to practice slowly breathing during that time. Because again, like often when we're so tense, everything's closed off, our shoulders together, we're kind of closing that natural open way of our airways. So you want to be able to broaden that back, lay on the floor, look up at the sky, head on the floor as well. And you want to, again, that airway naturally opens up. Some of those things, again, completely up to you, completely subjective, right? And then also with panic attacks, I also make sure that I outreach to a friend or a family member when I'm feeling them, because something about that connection, that warmth, that it's going to be okay, Leah, really helps too. And I also tell myself that, but something about that, someone else is there with me, really helps and lessens that fear of danger for me. So now that I got to talk about all the things about panic and anxiety attack, I hope, again, that you were able to really learn a lot of different symptoms. I hope that you were able to learn how it kind of works for different people and some of the ways to alleviate those symptoms in those anxiety attacks or those panic attacks. If you know someone who has panic attacks or anxiety attacks, as I say in every podcast episode, you can never go wrong with just asking a person, what do they need from you? Never just assuming, always just having a conversation with them of what can you do to help? And I always suggest that it's better to ask them before, It's hard to ask someone during an anxiety or panic attack, what do they need, right? Oftentimes you might find people who can respond. Sometimes you might come across a person who doesn't want to respond at that time. So kind of taking that effort and that initiative of asking them before they ever have an anxiety attack or a panic attack, right? So maybe even if it's a normal conversation and saying, I really want to learn how I can support you during a panic attack or anxiety attack. How can I help when that does happen? Because again, that allows that person to think about, okay, what do I actually need during that time? So ask. If you know someone, just ask what you can do. Just don't assume. Now, if you are someone who experiences panic attacks and anxiety attacks, I just want to remind you that you aren't alone, okay? Remind yourself that you're safe, that you're going to be okay, and just like all the other ones, you will make it out of it, and you will be okay at the end of that anxiety attack, at the end of that panic attack. And each time that you go through it, you learn something new, and challenge yourself to learn something new. And also challenge yourself to find different coping mechanisms that can really help you outside of a panic attack and anxiety attack, and when you are in anxiety and panic attack. It does get better. I do promise you that. It does get better, okay? If you ever do need someone or additional resources, please go to your nearest doctor, your family doctor. Ask for resources, as well as if you need any professional or mental health resources, please do not be afraid to ask. They are there to support you and help you. I hope that I provided a lot of new information for a lot of you, and maybe some information that you guys already know. I thank you once again for listening every single week. I am Aaliyah Gracine, and this is Side Grace. I can't wait for you to hear the next podcast episode. Share this one with a friend, a family member, share it to your story, and also leave a review because it helps me know what I can do to help improve my podcast. So, again, this is Aaliyah Gracine. Thank you so much, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your week.